This is the first time I've done this. Like I said, I'm always threatening to do this, but we're doing it now, you motherfuckers. Subverter. Talk more about Hunter S. Thompson. I love that feeling where the truth just hits you. Yeah, Hunter S. Thompson was a fucking genius. He was one of the very few dudes that really captured the angst of the '60s and the '70s, the Nixon era, and you know the he was a part of the acid culture of the '60s. He was a part of the culture like the San Francisco Haight-Ashbury movement, where it's like everybody was doing acid. All these people were like, and good acid. So all these people were like really coming together, and they were really like releasing their egos and their identity, and kind of like losing themselves in a movement, and in this hippie movement of the '60s, which seems like really stupid now. We look at it and it's like, God, look at these idiots with their long hair and their stupid clothes. But what they were doing was they were radically departing from the previous culture. I mean, the difference between the '50s and the '60s is fucking gigantic. The difference between like Buddy Holly and Jimi Hendrix is like, I mean, that's another world. I mean, that's not like a 10-year evolution. That's an evolution that would have taken hundreds, or not, maybe not even gotten there at all. It's almost like they needed the drugs. They needed acid and mushrooms and pot and peyote. They needed all that shit and heroin to launch themselves like from one frequency to the next one. And the '60s were a totally different frequency when it came to music, when it came to culture, and that set the stage for what happened in the '70s and the '80s, and where the really crappy music that came from the '80s and some of it in the '70s, but definitely the '80s. Like what that is like this consciousness, this incredible music where these people were like really like tuning into the art of it in the '60s. Like more '60s music is like classic fucking shit. That you hear today and you go, God damn, that's a good song. It's like they really figured out how to tap into the real shit. The real energy that makes art interesting, that makes art resonate. And I think they did it with drugs. And I think that the decline in the '70s and certainly in the '80s was because there was like a void left where like this tuning in, this connection to the real pure source was gone. It's like whatever they had hit, whatever frequency they had nailed in the '60s, the echoes of it had died down by the time the '80s hit. And I think Hunter S. Thompson had a fucking brilliant story that he wrote, a brilliant like piece that he wrote, the wave, the talking about how the '60s is like was like a wave, and that when the '60s ended, you could see where the wave broke back, like where they thought that people could be, like where they saw the true potential of humanity, of the United States, of the human race in general, and you saw it just roll back and go back to where it was. And that's what it was between the '60s and the '70s, and he nailed that shit better than anybody. Hunter S. Thompson's words today, still, when you look at, like, especially what was going on with the Bush administration, and what was just like the clearest evidence ever of massive amounts of corruption in government, where, I mean, they got us into a war that made no fucking sense. I mean, and it was obvious, like, across the board. The internet was, up. The information was being, very easily transferred back and forth, and yet it still managed to go through. And the way he felt about the Nixon administration, I mean, you literally could substitute Nixon for Bush and then insert most of the shit that he said into, the early 2000s. Raw sound